Picture walking into a room full of engineers on your first day. Nobody knows what you do. Nobody's worked with someone like you before. And the first thing someone asks you to do is pick a colour.
I'm just here to pick the colour of whatever material you're trying to use on a prototype.
In this episode, I sit down with Dan Salisbury, someone who's spent over a decade at some of the most respected design consultancies in the country, then walked away from all of it to become the only industrial designer inside a startup building robotic lab systems.
Recruit really good people and then trust them to do their job.
Systems that are currently being used to profile cancer biopsies, accelerate drug discovery, and compress testing timelines that used to take weeks down to days.
There's like 100% intent, like this has to launch, otherwise we collapse as a business kind of thing.
That's design that isn't decorative. That's design that's consequential. He had to earn his place from day one, not with a portfolio, not with a pitch, just by doing the work and waiting for people to get it. Most of them didn't until they did.
Yeah, it was like, I can see the impact I can have here, and I really believe in what the product has the potential to do.
And before any of that, there's the story of standing on a stage in front of one of the most iconic figures in design history. A project he'd rehearsed hundreds of times. Did it go the way he planned? Not quite. But what came next is something he hasn't forgotten. This is a conversation about belief, impact, and what it actually means to do design that matters. This is Why Design. Dan Salisbury, welcome to Why Design. Great to have you on the show. So you've spent over a decade working in consultancy at DCA and then Leia before making the move over to, I'm going to get this wrong, Automata or Automata?
Yeah, I got it wrong as well when I first joined. It's Automata. It comes from like automaton, some sort of Latin reference, I think.
Automata, right. Okay, so I'm probably going to say that 5 different ways throughout this interview, but you please do correct me. So Automata, you spent just over 3 years there now. Before we kind of dive into how you've built out Automata's hardware function from scratch, let's go back to a moment where everything shifted for you. So 10 years in consultancy to then in-house. Was there a moment where you realized at Automata that this is going to be different from consultancy life?
Yeah, I'd always had in the back of my mind about going in-house at some point. I think it kind of just depended on what it was that the company did. Still had to be something that I'd be interested in, that would excite me. Obviously, being a consultancy, you get exposed a lot to like the ways of working with in-house companies. A lot of the clients would have in consultancy would often have their own design teams, but they would tend to onboard agencies when they didn't have the bandwidth or they wanted to explore something a bit out of the kind of like red tape of a bigger in-house company. But I didn't want to be kind of like a cog in the machine. Just being part of a design team in some sort of like mega corporation. And I think it was just timing, really. Like the Automata job, I saw it on LinkedIn, and the remit was, we have this hardware product, but we don't have any industrial design. So the early remit was to basically come in, define a design language, define design principles, and then implement that in the product and get that product rolled out. And it was very rapid. Automata is a startup, so I think like the opportunity for impact was what attracted me. So yeah, I was like about 3 years into my time at Leia, and the job came up. Saw the description, it looked reasonably, excited by it. So I just went for it because it just generally I've always kind of followed my gut, like what feels right and what excites me, and it did. Like there was other opportunities I was exploring there at the time that didn't quite feel right. So this one did. So yeah. Awesome. Long way around of saying that's kind of, it just excited me when I saw the job description, really.
We'll dive into that a little bit later because I have a terrible habit of going completely off script after the first question. So we'll dive into that. But what did it feel like, joining Automata and to be the only designer in the deep tech lab surrounded by engineers and roboticists? Yeah,
it was a bit, particularly from Leia, where you're going from somewhere which the entire team pretty much as industrial designers. I was then put into an environment where at the time when I joined, there was maybe about 30 people in the hardware team, kind of a mix of mechanical engineers, electronics, like software people. And they were all put in place to develop what was Automa's product at the time, which was a robot arm. So it was all very much like, get this like very complex, highly engineered thing into production. And nobody had ever worked with an industrial designer before. So there was a bit of a task in terms of people understanding what it was I did. I remember being asked in my first week to like pick a color for something. I was like, I'm not just here to pick the color of whatever material you're trying to use on a prototype. So I feel like the bigger challenge really is like trying to work and collaborate with people when they don't really understand what you've been brought in to do. I think really the only way you can explain it, you can describe it, you can run through your past experience, but the only real way is to actually just demonstrate it. So now 3 years in, like the engineers who are still here from when I first joined, they get it now because they've seen the impact from like a prototype, which was very functional, through to now like we're on the second generation of what that's become. So I think now they definitely see like the results of it, but yeah, it's just kind of more like demonstrate by doing. You can't really explain industrial design. It's hard to explain it if people don't quite get it.
Yeah, it's and yeah, coming from a consultancy background, especially layer where you're surrounded by design, there's an assumption there people know what it is by osmosis, but yeah, surrounded by electronics and kind of engineers that some probably don't see the point, a lot of the time, because they're the stuff that's making the magic happen. But was that hard? Those early days of kind of justifying your position.
I think what made it easier was to the design team. Like my boss who brought me in, who was the head of design. She's from a digital background, but she was great in terms of like just bringing me in and trusting me as an expert in it. Just let me hit the ground running. And then there was also a few of the UX designers and a visual designer. And even though they're slightly different discipline, they get it. So at least like I had like the like-minded people around me. So that definitely helped. But it didn't really bother me in terms of, I guess, like trying to help people understand the role, because like I said, like it's a startup, it's very fast paced. I just did what I do, and then the results kind of speak for themselves. And then people get it. And also like I've kind of, I think any industrial designer's had this battle like their whole career with even, engineers or passing comments of like, "Oh, just make it look pretty," like that kind of thing, which always like gets under the skin of not just industrial designers, it gets under the skin of the digital designers I work with as well. And I've always had that battle. I had that battle at uni when there was like a BSc side of the course, which they would deride the BA side of the course a lot, saying it's just about pretty pictures. I even had it, a DCA from more of the engineering people who just saw design as like a beautification exercise rather than anything else. But if you get it, you get it. That's fine. And it's fine if you don't get it, as long as you trust people to do their job.
Slightly contentious one here, but what do you say to people who might refer to industrial designers as felt tip fairies? Because I've heard that kind of bandied around many times throughout my career.
Yeah. I mean, I generally I've always found like if someone holds that opinion, you can never really change it. And even if you demonstrate otherwise, you still tend to get those like sort of snippy comments from time to time. The way I always try and explain it, like when people say, "I'm making it look pretty," the way I talk about it is it's giving something an identity. It's not arbitrary, but it's not aesthetics for the sake of aesthetics, which like something like art would be. There's a meaning and a purpose and a rationale behind it. So I could talk for hours on like the design language and the design strategy behind like Automata hardware and why everything has been treated how it is. And part of that design strategy is also taking into account, the market we're in, differentiation from our competitors. Where it's a lot of the space we're in is like it's B2B, and a lot of B2B products just have no consideration for like an end user and no consideration for industrial design. So those people working in those spaces to then bring a little bit of joy, bring a little bit of like guess like higher quality execution and thought to things, just makes their lives a bit better, even though they're not the end customer. And then it also takes into account like the manufacturing process we have to use. So like I've built a design language here, which we are low volume, so we're always driven down routes of like, a lot of it is just anything you fabricate CNC sheet or 5-axis, and a bit of it's basically they're basically the two manufacturing processes we can use. And I've lent into that for the design language as well. So that's kind of like the impact of what industrial design does. If it was felt tip fairies, it would just be like, oh, here's like a pretty picture of what a bench could be, but no thought about how to actually make it like on cost or deliver a good experience for the person using it.
That's the added layer, isn't it? That's the bit that adds impact and value. Is the pretty bit, but then the actual functional, what the why bit and the how. So fantastic. Well, let's ask the podcast title question now. As I said, we've flipped things around slightly because I usually lead with this, but let's dive into your origin story and kind of, why design? What led you down this path of industrial design in the first place?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, with the podcast coming up, and I was trying to go back, and I think it started. I remember in probably year 8, like secondary school. I don't know how old you are, then like 12 or 13. Did some sort of like questionnaire about careers, and I remember graphic design being one of the results of that questionnaire. Wasn't really something I was aware of at the time. I think when you're 12 or 13, you don't really think about the process behind that goes into everyday things and objects around the world. But like graphic design was maybe a bit more understandable. Logos, posters, that kind of stuff. So I kind of gravitated towards that initially. I would say as well, it also suggested like park ranger as one of the options as well. So I don't know how good this thing was, but at least like
suit the hat with your beard,
yeah.
Strong look.
I don't know. There's probably some question about working outdoors or something. Maybe I said I'd be slightly interested in that. I don't know. But yeah, that kind of planted the seed, and then my secondary school offered graphic design as a GCSE. So I just took it. Generally at school, I just took the subjects I was interested in. I didn't really think about it from like what I want to do when I'm older point of view. It's just that I enjoy doing design. So out of like cooking and whatever the DT curriculum was, like graphic design was the most prevalent one. I think it was like textiles or cooking with the other options. So I was doing that at GCSE, and then so I just went to my local state comprehensive. And around that time, our school became a specialist technology college, which I still don't really know what it meant, but I think fundamentally they got a bit more funding for design and technology. So they actually offered as an A-level product design and technology, I think was the title. And this was before like UX and UI designers hijacked product design as a term and a job title and a job description. But really that was about, it wasn't industrial design A-level essentially. You got to pick something to design, you ran through like concept, you did a bit of model making, you presented it, you did a bit of design for manufacture and cost analysis essentially. And my A-level teacher, again, I didn't really realize this was the thing you could do in the real world, but my A-level teacher at the time, Mr. Bird, he said, like, I think it was just a chat one time, I was good at it, I was getting good results and good marks. And he said, you can go and do this. And he pushed me towards, he went to Loughborough himself. He said, yeah, like Loughborough's one of the best places. I think at the time, we're talking 2007, I think, around this time, 2007, 2008. So like Loughborough, Brunel, and like Northumbria were probably like the 3 big universities at the time. If you were going into design, I went to start going to open days. But he was the one who really made me realize that it was not just a job you could go and do, but actually something I was like capable of going to do. So for me, it was just, I just enjoyed it. So I just followed it from that point. I followed it to graphic design through to like the product design A-level, and then through to going and doing industrial design at Loughborough University. And really, it was just like I said, I just followed what I enjoyed. I think like he's probably been the most impactful teaching figure, like I guess in like my career and that kind of thing, like exactly what teachers should do. And sadly he passed away suddenly like a few years ago. And a bit of trivia, his son is Max Bird, who plays for Bristol City now. He was in the Derby County Academy. So his son's a championship footballer. But yeah, like he was a great source of, I guess, like helping me understand and pushing me in the right direction, seeing what I could do, I guess. So that's why design. And then from there, really, it's pretty, that focus is already narrowed, and I wanted to go to consultancy. Once I started to get towards the end of the course, just for that breadth of product exposure, ended up chatting to DCA folk at the degree show at Loughborough, got the job at DCA. Thought I'd be there for a couple of years, and I've been there for 7 years. But then I moved down to London and joined Leia, and then now 3 years at Leia and hopped to Automata, where I've now been for another 3 years. So
I guess you would have been a year or two behind Benjamin Hubert at Loughborough.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing his sketches for his final year project, like up around the what was the Bridgman Centre at the time. That's not there anymore. He was probably, I think he graduated in 2008 maybe. I think he might have graduated the year I started potentially. He's probably about 40 now. He's maybe like 4 or 5 years ahead of me. I was like kind of aware of him from a very early point. We would go to Loughborough as well.
And I guess did you work together at DCA, or had he left by that point?
No, he left before I started. But again, he definitely left his mark at DCA on some of the projects.
Yeah. No, that's cool. It's interesting how these things overlap. We've got a friend who studied in the same cohort as Benjamin, and they've gone in completely different paths. Paul's gone down more of a kind of manufacturing route in the Midlands, and then Benjamin's obviously doing this very exciting projects down in London. Let me pause here for a moment. Most of the leaders on this podcast did not grow because they hired quickly. They grew because they hired well. The right senior engineer can accelerate a hardware roadmap by a year. The wrong one can stall it. At Kodu, we help physical product teams make that hire with clarity and precision. If you're about to make a key design or engineering hire, or thinking about your own next move, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's talk before you commit. So when you look back down at your early years at DCA, what kind of designer were you then?
I'll be honest, like I wasn't very good. In terms of, I often joke, like there was, I did a lot of recruitment, like a bit later on at DCA, I did a lot of recruitment, and I did a lot of recruitment at Leia as well. So, seeing lots of portfolios, and the bit that always stuck in the back of my mind was like, I was dismissing portfolios or rejecting them and stuff when they were far better than what I was doing at that age. But I think also, like the tool sets changed, and I think the bar has just risen. I think particularly like, there was no real rendering when I was around the time of graduation. Like KeyShot didn't exist. I think that and some of the CAD tools have gotten way easier to use. So like now you are seeing like much more polished, refined designs. I think also where you can see inspiration has changed. There was no Pinterest and that kind of stuff when I was like doing this kind of stuff. But yeah, my portfolio was quite weak looking back at what it was when I graduated. But I think it was more from like how I was presenting the work and the things I was talking about. And also just my approach to styling. I think I used to overcomplicate the way I was approaching like form and detailing. It was like too complex. Like I think the hardest thing to do as an industrial designer is kind of restraint, but like restraint in like a compelling way without it looking basic or simple. But I think there was enough there that they saw I guess potential. I did my placement year at Diageo, so Umbrella Corporation, who own lots, Smirnoff, Guinness, Baileys, Johnny Walker. So there was a lot of like primary packaging and one-off like airport duty-free type things I was working on there for like Johnny Walker and that kind of stuff. So there was a bit of FMCG packaging type orientation. So like coming out of uni, I remember like the packaging department at Seymour Powell. I interviewed there. They made it very clear that if you join the packaging team, it's not a shortcut to joining their like ID team, because they had different teams. But then also DCA, with their clients, a lot of their clients being like GSK and Reckitt Benckiser and a few of the FMCG brands, I think they saw that and were like, okay, that could be useful. And there was Tim Sharp was the head of design at DCA at the time, and he brought me in. I think, like, to answer your initial question, I think I was probably not confident enough to stick to what I felt comfortable with. So I was trying to be the kind of designer that I was seeing the other designers at DCA being, which was like a lot of, everyone at DCA at that time had a giant Wacom tablet. So a lot of the work would be, and the first stages of work would be really beautiful, like Wacom, digital sketches. But I've never really been that strong at sketching, not from a presentation point of view. Like I'll sketch rough and dirty, but I've always been really strong and really quick in CAD. So I can visualize my head very well in 3D. And I would just like, now, I just jump into CAD. I can mock something in CAD and render it quicker than I could like do layers and layers of sketching. And I think the industry has now shifted towards that. But at the time, it was still a bit more traditional focus, where you would present sketches in like a first phase. And I was struggling with that, and like the feedback I would get would be like, I almost didn't pass my probation period.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a bit of debate around the time. Like, I was showing promise, but not quite enough. And then I really hit the ground running at DCA when I kind of ignored the feedback around don't go into CAD too early and all this kind of stuff. And so I decided, like, okay, I'm going to go into CAD and then I'll sketch over it. I then just like use my skill set to then help support the projects. So that took like a couple of years, like, to kind of get to that level of confidence. But once I kind of embraced, like, I just played to my strengths. I think eventually the feedback of like, oh, Dan jumps into CAD too early, and like my performance reviews and stuff, that stopped coming, because they realized that actually that's like how I work. And then funnily enough, everyone now jumps into like a layer, like the first phases of, even towards the end of DCA, like first phase presentations would be like photorealistic renders of like perfectly detailed CAD and everything. That's just like the way it's moved to now. So any advice I'd give to anyone is just like stick to your strengths. Don't try it and be like other designers, because everyone's different and how they approach problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've agonized over this over the years, when you're building teams and everyone's got their own strengths, but as a consequence, they've got gaps, they've got weak areas that they're not so strong in. And when I was kind of a young manager trying to train someone on something that they weren't particularly good at, or probably weren't that bothered about, really, they didn't see the point of it because they were really good in other areas. And as soon as I started, someone said something to me, why are you wasting so much energy trying to force this person to be someone that they don't want to be? By just make the most out of what they're really good at, if they're good for the business, and then you can find other people, or you can compensate in other areas, because you've got a good blend in the team. So as soon as I realized that, it reduced a lot of stress for me personally, because it's like, well, that person's going to be less annoyed because they're doing something they don't enjoy, that or good at, and they're going to be happy doing the things that they're good at, and I can turn my attention to encouraging that and getting them better at the things they're good at. So yeah, I love that. You mentioned that you met Dieter Rams
yes,
in your career as well. How did meeting him kind of shape your idea of what good design means?
It's still, even now, it was like, I realized it's actually 10 years ago. Yeah, it was 2015. So there was something called, I can't remember the order of these things, but I think something that DCA were quite good at was, if people had ideas, they'd let them explore concepts. And if those concepts were kind of like compelling, they would fund like submissions to design awards. So I did get a couple of like IFs and red dots for concepts we worked up, and they're not cheap, but DCA were good at investing in that, and funding you to go to the award ceremony sometimes and that kind of thing. But like, I think this one came about was there's a guy called James May, who's still at DCA now, and he predominantly works in like I forgot. It's like basically B2B side of the business. I forgot what it's called now. He had this idea to do a fuse box. I think his idea was, why can't the fuse box be used to like actually monitor your energy consumption? I think that was kind of like the like I said, the light bulb that he had. And when I heard this, like, it was one of those ones where just the idea of like how to do that almost just came fully formed into my head. Like I barely did any, I talk about jumping into CAD. I pretty much like jumped into CAD. I think I did 2 options and I just went with one of them. And that one was the one that I visualized, pulled together into like the submission. And I think originally I was just pulling it together to just submit to a red dot concept or something. And, I worked with James on that. And there was a couple of other guys who supported from an electronics point of view, like some of the electronics engineers, a chap called Giles Sparrow. Worked it up. And then I think at the time, I just saw, there was the Braun Prize, 2015 Braun Prize. I think the Braun Prize, they only do it every 3 years, I think. It's not like an annual thing. And it's also, you don't pay to play, like Red Dot and IF, you pay to enter, that you pay even more if you win. This one was, they pick just 3, like out of like 1,000 submissions, they pick the top 3. And then you go to Germany, go to the Braun HQ and then present. And then the audience then votes for gold, silver, bronze, essentially. And they have there's a professional category, a student category, and a hobbyist enthusiast category or something like that. And the Braun Prize came active, and the theme for that year was the extra in the ordinary. So ordinary objects, which maybe have become maligned, not really thought about too much. And the fuse box was just perfect for it, something that's never really been thought about in terms of how it's designed. So we submitted it, waited a few months, and then got an email came through saying congratulations, you're in the last 3. So I think it was something out of maybe 3,000 submissions or something. We got to the last 3 for the concept. So then we made a model of it. Did some animations to take to the show, and Dieter Rams was there. He was part of the audience. He was part of the jury, not for the actual deciding on the last 3, but he was there to vote on it on the last day, and he was sat in the front row. And again, credit to DCA. I was 25 at the time. I was a mid-weight designer, and Nick Bible, who's the director at DCA, he let me present. I think other companies maybe this the creative director or someone senior or lead would then take on that responsibility, but they let me present the project to Dieter Rams and an auditorium of around 200 odd people, which was a very interesting experience. It's probably the most practiced I've ever been. Normally my presentation styles, I don't rehearse, I don't script it, because then it feels forced. But this one we ran through hundreds of times before the show. And went up to the stage, then did the presentation. We came second. The thing that won was a life jacket. So I think monitoring energy versus saving someone's life, that's always going to win that kind of thing. And then in the after party, I think at the time Dieter would have been maybe 85, something like that. And he had his really beautifully made walking stick, which apparently people always ask him where he got it, but apparently someone made it for him. And he was joining in the party essentially. He was stopping for photos. There was lots of students there and younger designers all having photos with him. He shook my hand. He said congratulations. We had a brief chat. And it's one of those things where it's just even now it just feels a bit surreal that I met him. But also one of the jury was Benjamin Hubert. So that was my first exposure, direct exposure with him. So I met him then. So at least he was, when I did actually approach Lair eventually, he was already aware of me. So it was quite a few years that I actually made the move to Lair after that. But it was just I still don't think there's ever going to be something in my career that would top that in terms of when else do you ever get to meet Dieter Rams? It's the point of it. So it was, and you also present to him. So that was a really quite amazing thing to do. Which I can't say just still feels bizarre.
Yeah, I mean it's a top recruiting strategy from Benjamin as well, isn't it? Kind of sit on the jury and then just keep tabs on the top 3. It's but what a pivotal moment for you. That's amazing. So well, let's talk about the shift then from consultancy to automata. Told you I'd struggle with that. So after spending over a decade in agency and jumping into automata, what was it that cemented that leap for you. You mentioned that the advert stood out. You were clearly open to opportunities by the kind of towards the end of your time at Layer, but what was it specifically about Automata that really grabbed your attention and excited you?
Yeah, I think the first thing was like the remit of the role. To come in as the first industrial designer, the only industrial designer, and basically have free reign and to be trusted to define something, define a design strategy, define a design language, and then implement that. With it being a startup, it's like, we have this product, we need to get it to market. In consultancy, I don't know, the hit rate is very low. Like I'd say 95% of projects never see the light of day. So to go somewhere where it's like there's like 100% intent, like this has to launch, otherwise we collapse as a business, kind of thing. That was part of it. But then there was other jobs I'd seen or been approached about, which was similar remit, but the actual product itself I didn't really believe in or didn't quite like resonate with me. But like what Automata does is it's lab automation and the potential that has in terms of accelerating any kind of scientific testing. So typically what the system does is it connects the dots between the different instruments that you need to use to do whatever kind of testing that you need to. So it talks about the role as being like, it can reduce your time to get results back by, from weeks to days, because you've got that high throughput that you can run and automate. But fundamentally, like some of the things that we've done, there's a customer we have where we're automating the sampling of cancer biopsies, and this then creates a DNA profile of that person to do like targeted cancer treatment and therapy. So we're working on things that can potentially like save people's lives, or at least give them back more time and try and like manage their cancer. But it's also things like drug discovery. So there's like one of the things we were involved with, which wasn't actually drug discovery. One of the first implementations we did was in COVID testing, or PCR test that everyone was doing down at the University of Southampton. This is before I joined, but they had cobbled together some stuff, which was then automating like I think it was PCR testing for all the COVID samples. But then it can also be used for drug discovery, so vaccine development. Maybe how amazing would it be if our system was then used on something that was like a cure for cancer, and that kind of thing. But then it's now moving into a space where with AI is being leveraged in like the drug discovery space as well. So it's really, and then if you want to, you've got like potentially millions of models that these things are looking at in terms of what a treatment could be, and you can then test that with automation like faster than what you can do manually. So I think for me, there's got to be like two things that excite about a project. Is like, one, what impact can I have? And that was definitely there. I was given the freedom to operate. And then two is like, is the thing I'm working on, do I believe in it? And I really did. So like, it just ticks both of those boxes. And then at the same time, I'd not long become a parent. So as well as like, going from a consultancy where it was like fixed hours on site every day, having to trek through London, to East London all the time. It was like, hybrid working, flexible working, we understand like people here are parents and that kind of stuff. Their ultimate approach was like, recruit really good people and then trust them to do their job. And I think that autonomy and freedom to operate has also been part of it as well. But fundamentally it was like, I could see the impact I can have here, and I really believe in what the product has the potential to do.
Were you determined to step out of consultancy at that time? Was that like an active decision, like the roles you were applying for, or was it kind of fairly open at that point?
No, I wasn't specifically looking to get out of consultancy. Like, I think I was approached by other consultancies, some in London, some outside of London, around the time. But I think like some of them were of the ilk where I think there would be an even smaller design team in comparison to the rest of the business. So like at the DCA, there was maybe 30 team of 20 to 30 designers in like a business like 150. Some of these were like 500 to 1,000 people, and then like a team of about 5 industrial designers. So I didn't really want to go back into a space where I'd be like trying to fight for a seat at the table for design. I wanted to be somewhere which really was design led fundamentally, or believed in design. So there was some consultancy avenues like I did explore, but didn't feel right. So I wasn't just going to jump ship for anything. It had to be so right. And like it wasn't even if Automata didn't come up, I would have still been a layer until maybe something else did that worked for me and excited me. So it was like I say, it was just timing. I think the timing of something that came along, and it just felt right. So I went for it. When I met people in the interview process, the head of design was here, Pantea. She was great, really, really, really welcoming, and every step of that interview process just felt right as well. So everything just felt right and kind of just fell into place.
And you mentioned to me that it was an advert that you'd spotted that kind of was the first kind of engagement. You weren't kind of approached by a recruiter or one of their team. It was an advert. So what was it about the advert, that stood out, that kind of piqued your interest?
To be honest, it was one of the few adverts that actually said industrial design in the title. I think, I think it was like that was the first thing. I think anybody who's ever searched any industrial designers looking for jobs, like you type in industrial design in LinkedIn or Indeed or any of the job platforms, and it's just awash with product design. And every time you click on a job, it's digital. That I mean, that's not kind of an arbitrary comment, but that I'll be honest, it was like, oh, it's industrial design, and it's a lead position to own it. So it was just like industrial design. Okay, lead position. I was going through the requirements. They were looking for somebody with like strong industrial design background, yada yada yada. Then it was like building design language, and then when they went into the product description, that's what stood out really. Because they talked about the impact the product has in terms of what it does and what it delivers. So I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. So then I didn't have a portfolio ready at the time, so it was like quite a rapid pull together a portfolio and get it out. But then from that it was, but they didn't really look back.
Sounds like they actually wrote an advert as opposed to like a lot of companies will just chuck a job description on one of the platforms. So it's got you hooked straight away, like the headline industrial design. It's pretty straightforward but effective, and then there's enough in there in terms of talking about the impact and what you're going to be doing as opposed to what they want from you. And I think that's the thing that a lot of recruiters get wrong, whether you're in-house or kind of an agency recruiter, is that you focus more on what the company wants out of you rather than talking about what you get out of this, and what you're going to be doing. And you've got to excite people. There's a sea of kind of mediocrity out there in terms of the job adverts out there. You don't have to do much really, in my experience, to stand out. But when you do, you want to grab their attention, you want to excite them and get them to, as you did, kind of go out of your way to pull together a portfolio and apply and follow up and then go through that kind of that journey. So
I imagine AI is making things worse as well. I've seen you got AI job descriptions and then people using AI to apply and write their CVs. It's just like a bit of a
AI's it's a great tool. I use it every day. I've used it to prepare my notes for our conversation today. I use it to summarize the profiles of candidates that I then go and talk to my clients about. But it's a tool and it's a guide. I still deliver it kind of as me. And when I get emails from people at all levels and messages, and it sticks out like a sore thumb when they've used AI to craft it, because there's tropes, there's things like your work as a founder at Kodu is exemplary, and it's all just like, no one talks like that. No. It's like I use it as if it gets me 75-80% of the way there and then I need to tweak it, then it saved me a load of time. But there's no way you're sending stuff out kind of if you're crafted like customizing your CV for a particular application. Absolutely do that, but just you need to make sure you proofread it and it reads like a human. It's not full of M dashes and rocket emojis and nonsense.
And there's the classic one is always like, it's not just this, it's this. Like that one was like, it's like the Marks and Spencer's advert. It's always like that, this isn't just M&S, this is blah blah blah. That's just it all the time. But I also found as well, like I'm the same. Like I've written a few blog posts for Automata, and I write them myself first before then passing them through, and then I even end up having to like edit what it does, even though I'm very quite strict on what I tell it to do and not do.
Yeah,
because you still want it to sound differentiated. I struggle when I go on LinkedIn now because all the posts are written by AI and they all read the same and sound the same and nothing stands out. And also I find if you then become too reliant on it, you lose the sharpness and to actually write or think creatively. Yeah, we've got off a bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
But it's very, very appropriate because, I was on a demo call with LinkedIn actually the other day, and they were showing off their new AI kind of search assistant, and they asked me just to share a role that I was working on. So it's a bit of a mean one, but it's quite a tricky role. It's Chief Product Officer for a company out in Harlow that I'm working on. So Harlow in itself is a tricky location, but then Chief Product Officer is for the purpose of this intentionally vague. Most of the profiles that you're going to see and most of the adverts you're going to see are going to be digital leaning. And even though we packed in loads of kind of hardware keywords, 99% of the profiles it spat out at me on this demo were kind of digital product, and I wanted physical. So it's great in some ways, but it's creating more noise and more work in other ways. If you follow any of the kind of the recruiting kind of nightmares groups on Reddit or LinkedIn lunatics or anything like that, there's stories of like all this AI nonsense and people being screened by AI voice agents before being kind of put through or rejected, and you're missing out on good people. I think there's a way to reduce time and admin in the process, but if what you're putting in just dehumanizes it, one, you miss out on good people because we're not all robots, or two, you're putting people off because that whole process isn't like engaging, isn't so.
Yeah, that's true.
It's rapidly changing. But anyway, yeah, as you said, we went off on a tangent, so we can tick off AI for the time being. Before we dive back in, this one is for founders and CEOs building physical products. If you are thinking about hiring a VP of product, chief product officer, or head of R&D, this is not just another hire. It defines how your roadmap is set, how your teams are built, and how your company competes. At Kodu, we specialize in securing senior product and engineering leaders for hardware businesses entering their next stage of growth. Focused, discreet, high consequence. If that decision is on your horizon, find me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's talk it through. So in terms of Automata, you've gone into what you guys are doing, but if you had to describe it to someone outside of the lab tech world, could you kind of summarize kind of what you guys are doing, what kind of what your kind of hardware team is actually trying to build right now?
Yeah. So historically, Automata started, we're still a startup. We're like a 10-year-old startup, which is ancient in terms of startups. They started out doing a low-cost 6-axis robot arm, but there was no... They went to production, they were selling it, but they were struggling to really find like an application for it because it was kind of too generalist. There was a guy who worked at Automata at the time who kind of identified the life sciences as a potential way of being a bit more targeted in what we do, and then that's what essentially gave rise to that first I guess like system I talked about, which was doing the COVID testing down at the University of Southampton, and I was using those 6-axis robot arms in kind of like pods. So you'd have like a little enclosed pod and then a conveyor belt connecting them. Like there's like loads of them. That's not what our product is now, but it essentially kind of is a similar thing. What the product's become is essentially a modular lab bench, which is the foundation for the system, and that's kind of the thing I came in to bring to life because it was just a bit of extrusion, like aluminium extrusion at the time, with some kind of toilet cubicle door looking worktops on it. But it worked. So then the idea is like that's like super modular, but it still fits with like the volumes we have to work with, and also all of the compliance and regulations that you find in labs in terms of like materials and design. But then that basically connects the dots, and we integrate different modes of transportation. So there are robot arms that we don't develop our own anymore. There are ones we procure, we design around to integrate, and there are other transport systems like linear rails, and there's even one called maglev, which is essentially like it's really cool. It's these tiles where it floats, and they all just cool. And you can put like loads of them on there, and they all just shoot around all over the place. So you can take lab wear from like A to B to C to D all over the place. So when you see these systems all running, you've got this like connected modular lab bench with like loads of robotic elements on it. And then what all of that essentially does is connect the dots between all of the instruments. And what you realize is the majority of these instruments are designed for manual use. So somebody will manually, pipette, like you'll get these little trays called SBS, like weld plates, and they're just got like, 96, like there's different numbers, but they've just got loads of little wells in, and you'd have somebody like usually somebody manually pipetting like each row to prepare the samples, whatever those samples might be, and then they'll take that to one instrument, and then they'll do some prep, and you can take that to another instrument, but it's all manual time, it's all manual prep. And a lot of these people, they don't want to be spending their time on the manual processes. They want to be focusing on like the actual science or whatever it is they're trying to achieve, or simply just process more because it might be test results that someone's waiting to get back, for a cancer biopsy or something like I mentioned. So what the product does is it essentially automates those steps. So you can then have like an input of samples, and then the robot can like take it from instrument to instrument, and then you get like an output. But to make this work, there's a massive software aspect to it. So since like the repositioning to the life sciences, the hardware team that we have now is 6 people. And the software team is, 60, 70 people, because to orchestrate all of this, and particularly when you go to high throughput and try to run things in parallel, it gets very complicated. And there are other companies out there who do it. They've all got their own software solutions. They all do things slightly differently. We believe we've got a bit of a USB with some of the software products and the ways we're doing that, in terms of how our product, how the whole system can then run a workflow. And so a workflow is what we essentially call like those steps between instruments and how those samples get processed. So from a hardware perspective, we maintain the hardware catalog. I think one of the main things that differentiates us from our competitors is we've built this modular platform that's standardized. So it means we can design a system and deploy it really fast. Whereas most of the competitors design everything bespoke, and we've heard lead times to be like a year for these things to be like designed and built. We've got everything there ready to go. It's like the IKEA of lab benches essentially, but because it's so modular, that product catalog, we can expand. So we've kind of had the second generation of the bench, which has started rolling out this year. We have like a sort of foundation like products to that, and then now we're just expanding that. So a lot of what the hardware team is doing now is like new transportation systems that are more efficient or can take things further or faster. We're integrating those new modules that can utilize space differently. We're developing those. So it tends to be, if we see a need and we see that need is common across our customer base or kit, we'll then develop it, we'll test it, then we'll standardize it, get it in the catalog for we have a team called there's like a pre-sales team who design the actual systems from a scientific point of view with the requirements of the customer, and they essentially use our catalog to do that. But then that gets basically made and deployed and implemented. So I guess like the very simple way of saying it is it's a modular connected lab bench which has elements of robotics on it, which moves samples between instruments, and they can run any kind of science you need depending on the instruments that you pick and choose.
Amazing. And when you look at the bench systems, obviously you've come in and you've implemented the design language, you've kind of built it up from scratch. What design principles are now non-negotiable?
That is a point of contention as well sometimes. So like it's not a key design principle, but those SBS plates I talked about, which hold like the samples or the labware or like the medium that you're trying to process. They're a standard size, and there are various touch points or interfaces for that. And working with the design team, we have this sort of like pinky-ish color that we're using. So anything which is we've designed, which houses one of these plates, it's got this like pink color to it. So it's very recognizable and identifiable. But because of like the tolerances you use, we have to anodize it. Anybody familiar with anodizing knows like pink is not, or the pink we're using is not a stock dye. It's not a stock color. And we worked with a supplier in China. We got it all set up. It took a few rounds to get to like the exact pink we wanted. And then Trump's tariffs came in. We also had an issue with the supplier, so we had to move supply chain. And then for the rest of the anodized parts, it's just silver and black, so it's like really straightforward. But for the pink, it's like you think, I'll go for all of that sampling again, all of those rounds. You've got to ship our gold samples out to them for them to match to. And people in the procurement team hate me for it because they're like, why can't we just make it black or silver or just do something else? But in terms of the actual design principles of the bench, so I alluded to it earlier, but our volumes are low, so we don't have the luxury of, when I was at Leo, you'd be working on maybe like office furniture, but you're in the volumes of like 20,000 to 100,000. You can utilize things like die casting and to get more form and shape into things. Our volumes are so low, we just can't do that. So we're talking, I don't know, maybe 100 benches a year. It varies, it fluctuates, but we're basically limited to CNC machining, whether that's like cutting something out of a sheet or if that's cutting something out of a bit of aluminium. We do sheet metal fabrication as well, and then our essential material palette is anodizing and powder coating, and then there are certain materials you can use for work surfaces that have to be chemical resistance, that kind of thing. But we did indulge with the V2 bench, the latest version of it, in custom extrusion to enable this modularity. And it's not actually that expensive to do custom extrusion. Like a tool for like a die was like 1,200 quid or something like that. And then the actual cost is you have to order half a ton of aluminium as an MOQ with that. So we've got 3 different aluminium like extrusion profiles. So we've got 3 different tools, and then each one has to have half a ton of aluminium. So some of the thicker ones, like thicker in cross-sectional area, is fine. Like, we consumed that half a ton pretty quick. Whereas like there's so much a really thin profile where apparently we've got kilometers of this stuff. But it meant like we could get more design identity into our product by doing this, the modularity and the flexibility. Without, like the prototype when I joined was just some off-the-shelf extrusion, and that's what the competitors use. They just use off-the-shelf extrusion, and it all just looks the same, and you have like all these grooves in it, and it's not very clean. You're in a lab, right? So you want things to be like clean and like concealed, and no nooks and crannies for like stuff to collect in. So for me, really, like the non-negotiable is nothing gets made without me doing the A-surface design for it, and then signing that off with the supplier once they've done any like DFM and whatnot. But for me, it's always been about we have to own a bit of a design identity. And what I've done is try and, how do I speak about this without even showing it? But essentially, like, I've leveraged the processes we're using to build that. So everything is kind of made from, if you were to look at a bench, it's all from horizontal layers. So everything's kind of, you'd have an extrusion, and then you'd have like a layer set on top of that. So that could be like a worktop frame, and then you'd have the worktop material, and then you'd have whatever next layer. And then we have a light layer as well. My other non-negotiable with the light layer has to run like the full width and around the corners of the bench, so that for every other bench you connect together, you get this continuous, unbroken light layer. So it means that whether you've got like 1 bench or 2 benches or 20 benches, it's all harmonious and continuous, and you get this continuous line across it. So it speaks to like system level design essentially. I've always talked about it is like form following function, because we are so strong. I can't really indulge in anything else. So because the form follows the function, I've just lent into like the frame of the bench and all the structural elements is why we went down the custom aluminium extrusion, because then we can get a bit of form and shape and function into that and ownability. And it's the actual functional aspect. Like the V1 bench, the previous version, the only way to get any design identity into it was to clad it, but the cladding was just cosmetic. And it, particularly when you're dealing with engineers who don't get industrial design so much, they're like, that's just a cosmetic part, you know. And if anyone's looking at cost reduction, the first things that go are anything that's just cosmetic and not doing function. So by making the things that make the actual aesthetics of the bench also part of the function, you're kind of getting that industrial design and design language and design identity for free. Like no one can remove it because I've baked it in. So it's just kind of being clever with how you're using materials and how you're using those manufacturing processes. So like, yeah, everything's kind of like machined from a slab, but then, you know, you get like very kind of defined and tight, so precise aesthetic from that. So I've tried to go for something that doesn't look too as precise, but then we have like a 20 millimeter radius that I put on everything. So it's a little bit, but not too much that it gets too friendly. And then we try and be like honest with materials. So because we're extruding aluminium, we anodize it to try and like showcase that it's aluminium. We don't want to necessarily powder coat it or hide the inherent material qualities, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, yeah, I could just ramble about this for ages, but yeah, so essentially try to get something that's compelling and beautiful, but also is like, yeah, leveraging those manufacturing techniques and the functionality of the bench. So
it sounds like, yeah, you in a positive way, obsessing over the details, obsessing over the kind of the end user and the outcome and the impact, but it is all interconnected. And yeah, you did a great job of just kind of verbally visualizing kind of what that looks like. It's, yeah, we'll point people to the website. I'm sure there's some cool images on there and videos. But what's been you know, your proudest moment so far with Automata?
So there was a moment when, so we had the V2 bench. We did like a launch thing back in January where there was a new version or some new software features that we launched at the same time as the bench. So it was a live streamed, I guess it was kind of like a webinar, but it was like a live stream launch that people could sign up to and then watch it. And that was like the big reveal moment for the bench. And one of the things I wanted to do and what we weren't able to do with the V1 version of the bench was because that went through so quickly and went to market so quickly, we didn't have time to do any like studio photography or anything like that. We were relying on renders and visuals. I really wanted to make sure we got studio photography of the bench. So I baked that into the timeline so that, you know, we hired a studio out in Holborn for a couple of days and did a shoot there. Logistically, it was way more difficult than any shoot I did at Layer. Like we were at Layer, most of the shoots were like, you know, small things you just carry in a bag. This was like 4 benches. We had to get pallets and all sorts of stuff to go, and robots and that kind of thing. So I really wanted to do like photography to a level that no one in the market, none of the competitors ever go to that kind of level. And we did that. And that was all kind of like prepared and done and ready for the launch. But there was a moment when I was sat. We have like a demo suite on the 6th floor of our building in Islington, and we had the V1 benches sat as a demo system there. And then we had the V2 benches that just come in, sat fully operational. And then there was posters around the wall, which I worked with the visual designer on in terms of like the render style and the visualization. Which every deployment we do like a little render of it, and that goes in like a quite nicely graphically designed poster. And then on the TV screen, there was all the photography we'd just done. And it's just like, you know, I've been there at the time, like 2.5 years. I was like, it was a moment where I was like, okay, we talk about the impact that I wanted to have when I came in. I was just sat there and I was kind of surrounded by it. And it was a really nice moment, just be like, yeah, that's the point where it's like, you can't really argue the impact like industrial design has had in getting this to the level it's at. And then, yeah, we filmed the launch. I was part of explaining, you know, the features of the bench and why we did what we did. And that was a really good moment. It was pretty high stress for people running it, but then, you know, afterwards we all went to the pub around the corner, and it was just like a nice kind of like decompressed moment after all of this pressure to this launch. So that was definitely like the proudest moment here, where it's like I could really see, yeah, the results of all the not just my effort, but the effort that everyone had put in to get to that point, and also the kind of vision from, you know, Pantera, who I spoke about, the head of design in she was the one who pushed for it to get an industrial designer in the first place. And that was really the kind of like the fruits of our labour. So it was great to see.
Amazing. But with every win comes a wound. So somewhere along the way. So what's been the hardest thing? What's really kind of either tested or nearly broke your patience or belief on your journey so far?
It's a good question. I think for the most part, I've enjoyed a lot of this. I think maybe where like some of the frustration has come in is, like I say, like we're very low in volume, so trying to get certain things in can be a bit of a battle, which is partly why I designed the bench how I did, because the design of it is the function of it, as I alluded to. But it can be difficult at times, particularly with like working with suppliers or trying to do certain things when like the costs are so limited, because of the volumes we work with. Like if we could order like thousands, be fine. Like we could really get the MOQs down, the order quantities down. So it can be tricky at times to try and get certain features in. Like there are things we could put into the bench which would make deployment for our deployment team so much easier, but we can't do that because it'll add too much cost to the bench for what is like a one-off install. So you kind of pick and choose where to invest in, like the high value items. Like where do you get the biggest bang for buck? But I think in every element of design, like there's always compromise. You have to, and the way I've do describe my job to people at times is like often industrial design is just about finding the right balance between all of those competing requirements. You can't please everybody. So you just have to find like the best balance or the optimal balance between what keeps everyone happy, meeting the needs of the business as well as like meeting the needs of the user. And often those requirements conflict. So I think trying to balance that is quite difficult. So yeah, maybe that's like an area which it can be difficult to manage that in a way that you're happy with.
Yeah, massively. So we're rapidly approaching time, Dan. So I'll ask one or two more questions just to wrap things up. But what are you most excited about going forward in the next 12 months for yourself or for Automata? And then follow on question, the hardware team's quite small, as you said right now. Are there any plans, and should people be keeping an eye out on kind of hardware opportunities within the business over the next kind of 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, both good questions. I think I say the next 12 months, with the bench platform that we've just launched this year, we have built it in a way which is much more future-proof, because of the modularity and because of how it's built. We can do that. So now it's, I think the V1 was all about getting to market. The V2 was about making the products kind of what it should have been, potentially, arguably, in the first place. Now we're entering a phase of stability, but then also efficiency. So I think a lot of what we're doing is like now looking to optimize. So whether that's like cost optimization, whether that's introducing new accessories or new products to the platform that enhance certain things. It might be something to increase the throughput on a system. It might be something that just like means we can house a certain instrument in a better way, or it might be a new piece of transportation. We're now looking at essentially like building out, fleshing out that product catalog to increase that flexibility and increase what the system can offer. So I think like it's shifting the focus of the hardware team a little bit from delivering, to get something out there and done. So now we can focus a little bit more on R&D. So we are, my role as well has shifted a bit into product as well. So I've always kind of looked after the product strategy, but now it's formalized as part of my remit with respect to hardware. So I'm working on gathering insights, looking at areas where we can explore new projects. So for the hardware team, I've got some things in mind where we can explore potential new solutions to things where we can do a bit more of like kind of almost like a skunk works of building things, testing things, see if it works, get it tested. At the same time as like continuing to maintain and grow what's currently there. We had an engineer leave. We brought a new mechanical engineer in. We've had a quality engineer join. I think depending on how this like next year goes and then that expansion, potentially there's room to grow. It will be from like an engineering standpoint. If it does go down that way. So if anyone kind of has an interest in lab automation, working with robots, not necessarily designing robots and elements of those kind of systems, it's an interesting place to be. We do also have other parts of the business which have, we have like pre-sales engineers or like systems engineers who do more of like the back end and front end type things, like designing the systems at a high level and then also implementing and building stuff on site. So there are things outside of the hardware team. So yeah, I'd say that's probably where it's going now, is that period of like, we've got this product now, we're going to double down on it and just continue to improve and expand that product catalog.
Awesome. And best place for people to follow your journey and follow the business as well, and keep an eye out on like open roles or opportunities, would that be LinkedIn or Instagram, or where do you guys kind of tend to
it's pretty much solely on LinkedIn. I think there is an Instagram channel, but no one really seems to do anything on it. So yeah, like all of Automata seems to be on LinkedIn. They do have their own website for careers, so stuff is live on there. And even like another thing about Automata is they're pretty transparent on salaries as well. So they do normally list a salary range right up front when there is a role open. I'm on LinkedIn. I generally post, I don't know, twice a year. I just when I've got something to say. I'm not that active, but I do go on there quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe I'll post a bit more at some point.
We'll share the links to the company, the careers page, your profile as well on LinkedIn, so people can give you a follow. But yeah, Dan, we've gone over the hour mark, so you've got some exciting designs to be cracking on with, and obviously there's a family situation as well with a newborn on the way. So
yes, there's a second one imminent.
Exciting times. So yeah, it just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining me on Why Design, and good luck with the newborn.
Nice one. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for taking the time to do this.
No problem.